you, Bob Gordon.
I thank you, Pat. I am
Sit down.
Yeah, I know. The standing ovations are getting old. My name is Bob Gordon. I've had the opportunity, going back even before Facing the Giants, to be part of the faith and entertainment marketing world. I actually go back to a cucumber and tomato. I don't remember their names, but they bounced around a lot, and they were pretty cool dudes. And it is my pleasure to be part of this panel with my friend Josh Walsh and my friend Mark Harper. Mark and I actually go all the way back to Facing the Giants, where we were sitting in a restaurant in Nashville, Tennessee, and we're waiting for this meeting, and in walked Bobby Lee Duke and Grant Taylor, and we thought it was the coolest thing we had ever seen. Met Josh Walsh on a little movie called October Baby. Have you ever heard of that, with the Irwin brothers? And I will let these guys tell you what they do now and where they've come from, but the thing that's really exciting for me as somebody that's in the marketing side of things is these guys are filmmakers too, and they're marketers, so they understand the both and that's really an important element. So Josh, introduce yourself and what you do now.
Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Josh Walsh. I am a producer, and that's what I do now. And I put out a lot of fires and take a lot of phone calls, but I also work a lot in the marketing. In fact, actually, when I got started in film, I worked with Mark, and you were on the October Baby campaign as well. So it was the first film I had been a part of. I was on set, and I got a producer credit, an associate producer credit on that film by just kind of being there and serving and helping with anything I could. And then afterwards, the director of the film, who was starting a company at the time, John Irwin, asked me to come work for him and help with whatever was needed. And I was so green, very much one of the people of this festival, very excited to jump in and very eager about conquering faith film. And then Mark had to manage me throughout that process, which was a gift. Poor Mark. But it was very good for me because Mark was able to help kind of usher me into working in teams and how you communicate with people and how not to be so cocky. And I've gotten a little better. But no, Mark and me have worked together for years, and Bob and me have worked together for years. And man, hey, I listened to a podcast recently by the producer Jason Blum, who has a very successful company in Hollywood called Blumhouse that does horror films, and they're a niche group, and he's been an independent producer for years. And the commentator asked him how much does marketing affect a film? Like, what is the percentage of, like, what if a 1 to 100%? What part of a film being successful is marketing? And he said, in theatrical films, 60% of the job is the marketing, and I tend to agree. I think the film is so important, as we'll talk about, I'm sure, on our panel. Like, there was this marketer that marketed a lot of the most successful faith films out there, Chris Fuhrer, and I remember her telling me, like, really, the marketing is how high think of your movie as a paper airplane. Marketing is how high the paper airplane is thrown, and how far it goes is the film itself. So it's important to have a great film, of course, and that bleeds into the marketing, but a well-run marketing campaign is extremely essential, especially today in our crowded marketplace. So that is my name, Josh Walsh.
Okay, so Josh, real quick, before we get to Mark, you
Yes.
say to your producer, is there a little film coming out that you might have been involved with?
So I've been involved in a lot of films. So that little company that John Irwin started, we pumped out a lot of films. So I worked with their company for 10 years. I spoke last year here, so some of you guys might know me. But I produced a movie called I Can Only Imagine with those guys. It was probably the most known film that we've all worked on. Last year, Jesus Revolution, I produced. And then currently, I have a film that's coming out in 6 weeks, which is called Unsung Hero. And I think we're going to screen it tonight. So,
who's excited about Unsung Hero, the story of the Smallbone family? Mark, you probably have the longest career in faith-based film and marketing out of any of us. And that's not to say you're old.
It's okay, I understand the gray hair.
You jumped in before, really, it became... Giants is in a lot of ways, Facing the Giants in a lot of ways. You talk about the Passion of the Christ, obviously that got everything going. But it was really Facing the Giants that started the era we're in now, where filmmakers felt like they could tell a story that honored God and really make an impact. But you go before Facing the Giants.
So I think I started on the movie Omega Code years ago. Left Behind was the big one that we were in charge of releasing into theaters. But I was a youth pastor, and I loved showing movie clips to my youth group. And back then, you used to rent a film, and they'd send it to you on a VHS in a hard plastic case. You'd show it, and then put it back and send it back to the company. And so, yeah, I kind of been around a little bit.
What is this VHS of which you speak?
I'm not even going to go there. So, gosh, I mean, even DVDs now, people, I hand out, what am I supposed to do with this?
My son calls them
It's
DVD
yeah,
records.
use it for a coaster. Yeah, DVD records. I work part-time with Revelation Media. Started helping them with the animated Pilgrim's Progress movie release, and we put that in theaters through Fathom. And then we've done a couple of other Fathom releases, The Matter of Life, which we actually saw at the Christian Worldview Film Festival 3 years ago. And then we helped Tim Mahoney with one of his films. We're right now focusing on iBible and the launch of iBible. And my wife's from Bulgaria, and so we distributed Pilgrim's Progress in theaters in Bulgaria, and we're one of the pilot countries for iBible, so that's kind of exciting. She and I have a film company together called Starfish Stories, and I was inspired to start that film company after seeing the documentary Molly about an orphan that somebody took into their family and became one of the richest men in Kenya, and then he started helping other orphans that were like him when he was younger. And I just thought, out of all the marketing experience I've ever had with films, I really wanted to focus all of that energy on bringing families together and trying to inspire people towards foster care and adoption. So that's what we're focusing on with part of our time. But I get a chance to hold up the arms of a lot of filmmakers over the years. It's just been an honor. God has just really blessed us with some amazing stories. And gosh, back in the day, we used to have like a year to market a movie, and now it
you have like
feels
3
like
weeks.
we've got months. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is you watch what Angel is doing, and they basically market for 6 weeks, which is a lot what the big studios do with their films with the big television advertising budget. And as Mark's saying, we used to go back. The Kendricks was finished making a movie in July, and we'd be on the marketing team from that moment on until the movie released the next September.
Yeah, not as many movies in the marketplace like in the early days. Like what he's been around the film, faith film marketing for a long time. He's like, those are like vintage days. When you talk about Megaco, people are like, I don't even know that. Those are like early Kevin Down years and Rich Cristiano years. I love Christian.
Josh was 3 at the time.
I was
that we
3.
were
You know what's
working on
funny
film.
is I grew up watching a lot of the faith films, and I've always been a fan. And I actually have no problem saying that. Like some people get so, it's not cool to be, a faith film fan. I'm like, I love it. I love Christian music. I love Christian films. I wouldn't be in it if I didn't love the message that we try to do. I, of course, want to elevate the content and the business strategies and how we do it, as I think is happening right now. And as that happens, there are new challenges. When Mark started out working on these films, it was extremely novel for churches and Christians to rally behind films and make them and put them out. So you really had to really, we didn't have even the P&A budgets, which P&A is Prince in advertising. I don't know what it really means, but Prince would be the actual Prince of the film, I think, in the advertising is what it stands for. But that's your advertising budget. And back then, they didn't have the budgets they even have today. So today, our faith films have not bigger compared to Hollywood, but we have more substantial marketing budgets. Where when Mark started, it was all grassroots. There was no ad buys and digital spends, and like you had to mobilize. And in some ways, it was great, because they went out there and you could really mobilize a groundswell, and you had more time to do it. You had, a year to market something because there wasn't 3 products in the marketplace. Even when Steve and Alex started, it was incredibly novel that their films were in theaters and at Blockbuster and out there, doing what they did. Today, we're in a different landscape. Last year, we had a faith-adjacent movie make $200 million in box office, and there was probably collectively, I don't know, $300 million, $400 million worth of, or probably $350 million worth of faith box office. So now there's an audience starting to grow, but there's new problems. There's more products. There's fatigue. There's, the old strategy. So that's what I'm sure we're going to talk about today.
So like your old studio is releasing 5 films this year. Kingdom
Crazy.
Story Company.
Yeah.
Angel's releasing 6. You got the Kendricks. You've got other independent films. Yeah. There's a lot in the marketplace. So whereas in the past we would market to a faith audience, hey, here's a faith film. Now we're doing that and saying, hey, you may want to see our faith film instead of their faith film, which isn't ideal, but
No, and I go back and forth if it's ideal or not. I think it's good to have competition in some ways because it elevates the medium. So I don't see it as competition. I don't say competition in a negative way because I think a rising tide lifts all boats. And if these faith films are working, I don't care if it's Angel or I'm very much right now rooting for one of these things to break out because I think it gives everyone an opportunity. And honestly, it gives us an opportunity to learn. I think there's some really good questions to ask. I think something that I observe a lot in the space of entertainment is I think people don't think enough through the whole cycle of a movie. So people are running around green lighting movies they're passionate about, stories they think could work, but they're not thinking through the whole process. And there are certain things in the market. They should talk to marketers because there are certain insights that you find. Like one of the toughest things about marketing, which is probably why I wouldn't make a good marketer, is it's so tough because you're dealt the hand you have to make the best of the hand that you're dealt in the product that is out there. Now the products are getting better, but if something shifts in the collective, consuming habits, and you're stuck with a product that is not at the cutting edge of that, it's very difficult to make it work. And I remember sitting with Stephen and Alex Kendrick. Obviously this festival is very based around their church and the things that they've done. And they had some of the most. You were there you I think hosted it at NRB. Like, man, what, 9 years ago? I don't know how long ago that was now, but I remember sitting there. It was super insightful. We had just finished a movie called Woodlawn, which we were going out there telling the world that it was going to be the next giant hit film, and we were the innovative people, and our films are the greatest, and doing all the things that filmmakers do and the traps that they fall into. And our film, didn't flop, especially in today's standards, but it was not what we thought. We thought this movie was going to be $50 million box office, and when all was said and done, it was about a $15 million box office. And that might sound great if your movie cost $1 million, but if your movie cost 20, between the marketing and the production, you just lost money. So that we can talk about in our producer breakout tomorrow. But I remember the Kendrick sitting there so humbly saying, everybody blames the marketing. And it's true. It's one of the sucky jobs because at the end of the day, if the film does well,
Christian world.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So that's somewhat in the Bible. But if it does well, everybody takes credit. Success has 1,000 fathers, and failure is an orphan. And if it doesn't do well, they blame the marketing. And the Kendrick said that, and I remember that being super insightful because that's true. We all do that. We all turn around and go, well, the marketing was so poorly run. It was obviously their fault. So, yeah, it is a tough job to market films, as these guys would tell you. And it is a thankless job. But it is a really important part of the process if you want to make movies or television shows and get them out there that I think we actually probably collectively don't do a very good job. In our niche or our group. And I think there are some things to learn from the guys at Angel, and I think there are some things to learn from some of these successes over the last couple of years, and to really look at it. If it's true that 60% of the job is marketing, we've got to look in the mirror a little bit.
Okay, so y'all have been asking some great questions. We're going to get into them in 1 second. I want to ask Mark first. What has changed from the late 90s to 2024 in terms of faith-based films and faith-based film marketing?
Yeah, just to give an example, when we did the movie Fireproof, we were just doing good to put up a Facebook page, and let that organically find an audience that really hadn't even begun the Facebook advertising to the degree that it is now. So I'd say one of the biggest things that has changed is advertising strategies. Mr. Kendrick's going to be joining us now. Stephen, good.
Woo! Stephen likes to come late so that you'll applaud.
I was writing a Bible study on abiding in Christ, and somebody walked in and said, "You're supposed to be on the marketing panel." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Abide with
I
us for a
apologize.
second.
Forgive me.
And Stephen, as we said in the beginning too, Stephen is a filmmaker that loves and understands marketing and is always an idea guy. So I love the fact, again, that we've got 3 filmmakers up here that also understand the marketing side. So Mark was just sharing with what he's seen change from the late 90s when he got into the business to today.
So
This guy was teaching us about marketing on Facing the Giants days.
I would say the biggest change from advertising strategies being more digital is now just how much more there is to distract. There's just so much. There's so many stories. There's so many different streaming networks. There's so many emails, texts. Like, there's just so much noise. And so I think the challenge these days is how do you get out ahead of that noise, I mean, obviously, if what you're doing is committed to God and you're on track with the purposes that He's put on your heart, then He's going to open up those doors. But you're still up against a lot. You're a boat and you're trying to get up over the wake. So
That's really good. Okay, so we're going to start with the questions with one ties in. Don't feel like you all have to answer, but if you have something you want to add to it, feel free. It's with online marketing, what are your feelings on paying influencers for quote unquote organic marketing versus paying for traditional web video ads, and what are the ethics of
These guys
of paying?
came prepared. These aren't light questions.
Somebody knows what they're asking here.
Yeah, that's a great question.
And I think we have probably every marketer at the festival. Everybody else is in these cool producing podcast sessions, and we're the marketing people.
So influencers versus
I'm really big into authentic testimonies. Many people ask us to endorse their stuff, and I tell them I'm going to be honest. If I watch it and I think it's crappy, I'm going to be honest that I don't love it.
And we thought your language was bad.
Many times we will withhold on our end. So I want other people, anytime we do screenings or pastors, whatever, I'm like, if you like the film, tell us.
Except for Justin Tully. Don't ask him.
I asked Justin to help me work on my film because he always trashes it, and I'm like, yes, thank you. So, but anyway, I'm okay with spending money to get the right people in the room or to fly our people out there or to work it out so they can see it. But we never want to spend money to try to change their review of the film. I want total authenticity. I don't want the audience to ever sit in a theater and feel like we overpromised and underdelivered. Because you may sell a few extra tickets right then, but you've destroyed long-term trust. So it's a big deal to me. The whole under-promise, over-deliver is a fundamental aspect of our marketing. And many times I will pare down our wording on stuff because it may sound like, it drives me crazy, especially in the earlier days when Christian movies would come out and then the DVD on the back, it would say, this is the greatest Christian movie ever made. And I'm like, don't put that. Don't put, because when they sit there and watch it and they're like, no, it was terrible. I mean, how many times have you watched a film and you leave disappointed? So Flywheel was a fundamental, foundational principle on marketing for us because people walked in the theater expecting it to be a 2, and it was like a 4. And so they left happy. And so we didn't say it was a 10, though, But I remember going into Narnia when it came out, the first one, and they had hyped it so much that this is going to be an 11, and it was a 7. And if they had only gotten me to the room and I thought it was going to be a 5, I would have been like, whoa, it was better than I thought. Instead, I was expecting an 11, or a lot more. So a key is long-term planning, so you're developing long-term trust. But it always helps if you have a product that's worth marketing.
That's so true. Hey, Mark, to that point, to what you were just saying, we have to be above the noise. We have to be in front of the noise. How, if we're under promising but still over delivering, how do we get the audience in the movie theaters?
Yeah,
well, right. And that last question I think has to do with this emerging marketing strategy of these influencers that have a huge following. So they're almost like little radio stations and little television networks now because of their audience. You might have some influencers that have 1 million people that are followers. But I've still always questioned what are those actual numbers. If they were to say something about our film, how many people are actually going to see it? And are they counting that as a view or as an impression? Did they actually watch the video, or are they scrolling by and the video started and then went by? And they have rules for that too. Like 2 seconds counts as a view. Well, 2 seconds isn't going to get someone to see your movie. I will say too, just as a caveat, because we've worked on theatrical films, our answers are going to default a lot to those kinds of marketing strategies. But obviously, if you're working on a film that can be used by churches as a resource or a teaching lesson, I mean, you just kind of apply the principles to whatever the distribution outlet is for your particular film. And we can talk more about that at the end too, if anyone has questions. But
yeah, and the producer perspective, I feel like on marketing is you get paid to do this. You do the movie for free. Like, marketing is a very frustrating period of time, typically for me, because there's so much. I mean, anybody who stands up and says, "This is what you got to do," like, run, because there's the game changes. I feel like every month something is different. There are abiding principles, as you know, Stephen's been at this more than us. But it is so hard to know what's the right thing to do in the middle of it and what's working and what's not working. Just, you know, like you can't understand a problem until you fully understand it. You can't improve it if you can't fully understand the problem. And I feel like with marketing, so much of it is just trying to fully understand if what you're doing is working. So maybe the teams I've worked on haven't been as pure as the Kendricks. I have been a part of campaigns that paid for influence, and I would tend to just agree with what you said. We've only done it a handful of times, and you actually kind of feel dirty about it sometimes because you're paying someone to do something they weren't inclined to do. And I feel like, yeah, maybe you get more eyeballs, but it doesn't come across as authentic. It doesn't, if you get an influencer who's actually fired up about your movie to get online and talk about it, like I think about Lauren Daigle when she went on fire for Sound of Freedom. It was very, a lot of those very high-profile Christian musicians don't typically lend their platforms to products out there. So when and I don't think she's ever done it, but she got on there and was like, can I be real with you? I just saw this movie. It blew my mind. I didn't know about it. And it was huge, right, for the movie, but it was authentic. They didn't pay for that. Yeah. And I paid for it, and it's always like, hey, my good friend is doing this thing, and you should watch it. And it just doesn't feel, it's not this endorsement. And so I think there's better ways to spend the money to try to accomplish what they're trying to do. Like you said, could you put together a room and fly everyone in? And it's a cool room, and that person's there. And if the movie works, now the movie's got to work. Yeah, right, but if the movie works, they're going to be moved emotionally, and they might go out and share that. Or they're going to be moved spiritually, and they're going to go out and share that. So I think there's better ways, my personal opinion, for all it's worth, which everyone has an opinion, is it's not a good spend of money. And it's a little unethical, as you said, to buy it if it's not authentic.
Okay, so what are some bare bone essentials when it comes to marketing? In other words, where do you start? And I'll start with mine real quick. I think even if you've never done any marketing and you're not quite sure where the platform's going to be for your film, have someone on set that's capturing what's going on. Behind the scenes, photography, just something.
Maybe Bob Gordon.
No, you don't want me because I can't hold the camera. You want somebody that captures the content that can then be used once it's determined where your film's going to go out. So the very basic is don't make your film in a what's the word I'm looking for? Just in a vacuum where nobody else is around. Make sure that there are people that are helping you capture the heart of what your film is, because then at least you've got some material when you're ready to start marketing.
I think a key issue is it's a whole lot easier to market excellence and something that people want. Sometimes I've told filmmakers, take a chunk of your marketing budget and go fix your film.
So good.
Because because excellence markets itself. People walk out and they give you that word of mouth positive. But I've had people come to me and they've shown me their trailer and it was so bad. And I looked at them and I said, do you like this? Do you like your own movie? And they were like, not really. And I'm like, then please don't ask the world to watch it. Go work on your film and make it better. Take out everything crappy that's in your movie. The Proverbs says, remove the dross from the silver. All of our movies, the first cut is way too long. There's extra cheese in there. There's bad acting. There's all kinds of stuff. And one of our fundamental principles of editing is if it's weak, it's coming out. If it's cheesy, it's coming out. As much as we can survive taking stuff out. And it's like the whole boat lifts every time you throw a brick out because you're removing the dross from the silver. But sometimes it's the 7th, 8th, 10th edit. And you got to have people that will be honest with you about how bad your movie is. If you just show it to your mother and your grandmother and they say, I'm proud of you, that doesn't help your film. You've got to get blunt people who love you and say, bro, I love you, but I hated the third act. I hated it with all of my heart. And here's what's wrong with your film. You need those people. Those are the people I look for when we're screening a film. It's like, please come be blunt with me and crucify this movie, because then I can go work on it and make it better. So that's the first thing, is make your movie good. Yeah. The second thing is realize that every movie doesn't need to be, in every theater in America or whatever. Sometimes you realize my kid's not going to win American Idol, so I'm not going to put them on American Idol. But they could win in our local talent show, so I'm going to put them in our local talent show. So find out where is the place where you're filmed to thrive. Sometimes straight to PureFlix would be solid gold. you're going to hit a double and it's going to be a big win for you. But if you try to kill yourself getting a theatrical release and it's not really positioned for that, you're going to waste a lot of money and a lot of time, and you're going to feel like it's a failure. So finding out what is this product and where's the best field or level that it's going to set them up for success. So for us, Flywheel was one theater, and it was our local theater, and it was shown on our church projector. And people told us it's not worthy of a theatrical release. Or so many, and they told us Facing the Giants was not worthy of a theatrical release. And we had to go work on it more after Provident picked it up and do a whole lot of extra post-production to get it to that level, because everybody was straight to DVD. And it was in prayer that we walked forward by faith, but it was very iffy risk up front. So.
Yeah, that question was what are the marketing essentials? You've got to know the audience of your film really before you make it in the script. Alex said it at lunch. Your film is not for everyone. So who is the film for? Who is going to resonate with it the most? What's the affinity of the story? You know, Facing the Giants had that sports affinity. So we knew who to run after to get feedback, to put the film in front of people. So that audience, the other key thing about that too is when you're trying to assemble an audience to get feedback, that's going to be your very first lessons on your marketing. Mm-hmm. Who are you talking to and how are they responding and how are you describing the film to get them there? And I will tell you, in all the screenings that we've done, and I mean, gosh, we've probably done hundreds, maybe close to 1,000, those survey cards that we use, the difference between a 8.5 and a 9.5 could be the difference of whether you should do a theatrical or not, because Christians are so encouraging and positive, and like he said, oh, this is the best film I've ever seen. It was so good, I loved it, but they didn't love it enough to go get a group and buy tickets on opening weekend, or to tell anyone else about it if you're not dealing with a theatrical film. The essentials, just real quick, there's categories of marketing. Marketing is such a broad term, okay? So I say draw a triangle, put your story on one side, and I say let's call them stories. Let's not call it content. Content to me just sounds like something you throw on a wall, right? The story is, what's the story that you're supposed to tell? What's God put on your heart? So put the story on one side of the triangle, and then what is it? Is it a short film? Is it a theatrical film? Is it a TV movie? Like, be honest about what that distribution outlet most likely is, and then that's going to kind of dictate your marketing. And then there's a couple different categories. There's what you pay for, which is almost the purest form of marketing, because you can spend to reach a specific audience and see how they respond. The second category is publicity, which is earned exposure. It's getting a publicist to get someone to write an article about it, or an editor to do a story, or a podcaster. Podcasts are amazing these days because they have audiences and they resonate with the affinity or the story, and you start to find out, wow, this is picking up some traction. So, but that publicity, it's not free because you have to hire a publicist that knows somebody. The next category is promotion. So doing screenings, going to conferences, creating things online to try to entice people. That's promotion, okay? That's the next category. The next one is partnerships. When we did Facing the Giants, it just so happened that Sherwood was the church hosting the pastors' conference for the Southern Baptist Convention that year. So we were able to do a screening at that conference and be there before even the Great Big Convention. And then we couldn't show it during the Great Big Convention at the time because, you know, they didn't have the equity yet, the relational equity that they built over time. But we just walked around with Michael and we were, okay, here's this pastor. Okay, we're going to call and follow up with them. So partnerships is that next key category. And then the catch-all is the digital side. So websites, social, all those types of things. Those might have each of their own categories that we just talked about, but you really specifically focus on what do we do, and you have to these days with digital, you know, your social media. And I just want to do a quick shout out to Kyle Roberts for What Rhymes with Reason. You need to go look at the social media on What Rhymes with Reason. The guy's not only a great director and producer, he knows how to create the baton, the materials, the reels, the images, that people can run with. And so that's an important category. So I didn't mean to take all that time.
I don't even know if I have much to add until after April 26th. Then I'll come back and I'll be like, guys, this is how we do it. When you're in the middle of it, you realize how foggy it all gets. So understanding what is the essential. I think, to Stephen's point, this is kind of a overly practical or overly simplistic, but I think it's true. You really do have to start thinking about marketing from the idea level. I think it's like it's a balance, right? You never want to be.
Here, let's real quick go to that question. How should I think about marketing in the idea and pre-production stage of a project? So go ahead and answer that.
It's a balance. I find that I usually sit in the middle of and have to get the heat from both sides, right? Marketing people would like a marketing plan before you greenlight a script. Creative people would say, hey, if you asked, people back in the 20s or pre-cars, what they wanted, they would say faster horses. And there's some truth in the middle of that. Like I don't think if you polled audiences back in the day when Steve and Alex started, they would say, yeah, flywheel is what we're looking for. So there's a bit of entrepreneurial creativity, vision that God gives these creative guys that you have to listen to. And then there's the side of smarts of listening to the marketers. And that's why the Bible says, of all you're getting, get wisdom and understanding. I pray for that all the time because it's so hard in the middle to know, is this a wise decision who we cast? Is it not? There have been casting decisions like War Room. I don't know if you guys had made a marketing plan at first, but the fact they cast Priscilla Shire, I remember people being, that was the stupidest thing ever. She's not an actress. Lady had a humongous following amongst the core audience of our films and was a genius move in retrospect, but it's always genius in retrospect when something works. So there's so much of that. There's so much of that it takes wisdom in the process. So I don't know, man, pray a lot because you're going to need it.
It definitely is. And the other is you don't have to be a marketer. You're going to learn marketing as you're making films, but find people that can come alongside you. That's going to be a huge thing.
Bob,
okay.
when you talk about fundamental aspects of marketing, so some of the tools that usually are developed in an EPK or whatever, I would say your trailer is probably going to be your number one tool that's going to cause people to get set on fire and want to see it or not see it. When a movie comes out in theaters and I'm considering it, I'm just going to watch the trailer. The movie poster may be great. Most of the time, I don't even look at it, to be honest. But I'm watching the trailer, and then I may check online reviews and stuff like that. But that trailer is fundamental. When you ask about planning ahead of time, two things. For Facing the Giants, Alex wanted in the trailer, and it's in the trailer, he wanted to hear somebody saying, I cannot believe what I've just seen. I cannot believe what I've just seen. He wanted that in the trailer. So he wrote it into the movie.
That's amazing.
So that it would be in the movie and we would put it in the trailer. And it worked, that moment that's later on. With The Forge, Alex had this whole idea of discipleship and this whole mentoring storyline. And I said, Alex, what if we connected to War Room, the biggest movie we've ever made, and we tie it into the same universe and we use some of the same characters? And because I was his little brother, he was like, I don't know. I'll think about it. And then he came back and he's like, all right, guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to tie this movie to War Room. And so
originality is forgetting the source.
But what happened? We took, by default, something that we already have that has a massive following and that reached across denominational racial lines and has an international connection. People love War Room. And we're tying in Miss Clara, and she doesn't have a ton of scenes in the movie, but she's going to be in the trailer, and it helps propel this movie and this message about discipleship with some key different characters. But people have already, when they hear it's tied to War Room, they're like, I want to go see it. And I'm like, praise God that helped us early on in the planning with the marketing side.
Love it.
Can I add one thing onto that is the title. And I would say these guys do titles, I think, better than anyone I've met. And I think I've learned that title has got to be, to get someone to click on the trailer, you need to have a great title. And these days, a title that what a brand isn't what you want it to be. It's what somebody remembers, what they took away from it. Fireproof, a movie about marriage. It just said it. Once you realize this was a marriage movie, it's like you just get that aha. But there's even a little bit of it just creates that curiosity. So I think title has got to be one of the most important things. And I do think that the art, when you saw Fireproof and you saw these wedding rings as the two O's, you knew, oh, okay, this is a relationship movie. Boom, watch the trailer. So yeah, I think title, key art, and the trailer.
And a little plug for the tagline on War Room. Yeah, War Room's an intriguing title, but you don't necessarily know what it means. You add it to that, prayer is a powerful weapon. What, 4 or 5 words, boom, okay, I get it now, and you're ready. Okay, so we've talked a lot about theatricals, but in this day and age, and even a Kendrick Brother movie, there are questions about working with Angel Studio or Catalyst or Fathom events. Lifemark was released as a Fathom event. What are the differences in these new ways of distributing films that aren't straight to home entertainment, but aren't your traditional 2,000 theater release on a wide screen?
It's a little bit wild, wild west right now. So with Fathom being an option, and then Angels is pre-selling tickets or you pay it forward. There's that whole thing that's going on, and you've got all these streaming services that want it too. As I said before, looking for that position. Where are we setting ourselves up for success? Where we're being good stewards of the marketing money and the time that's going into it. With Lifemark, we were hoping for a theatrical release because the pro-life message Sony couldn't touch. The higher ups in Sony, they couldn't touch that pro-life message, even though it was really about adoption rather than abortion. But because they couldn't touch it, we realized we're going to have to build the marketing machine ourselves, and it turned into that Fathom was the sweet spot for us. It was a shorter window. We didn't spend a year marketing. It was like 2 or 3 months instead of intense, interviews and stuff like that. And then we saved a lot of money by just going with Fathom and not trying to crush it in 10 million theaters. And it was a good move for that specific film. But I think praying for wisdom and direction every step of the way is a key. On Facing the Giants, we had an opportunity to go on Oprah. And our pastor prayed about it and came back and said, I do not feel like that we need to sit there and try to get $8 million of free marketing promotion off of Oprah because of where she is standing and communicating right now about the gospel. And so at the time, he said, I don't have a piece about it. So we said, okay. So we didn't go. And then we get a PG rating, unexpected, and it comes out with the Drudge Report, and the marketing team was helping to propel this, that this movie got a PG rating because of explicit Christian content. And we're like, PG, drugs, alcohol, witchcraft, violence, sex, and Jesus? One of these things is not like the other, And so but what happened is the controversy of the conversation about that propelled Facing the Giants, this little church-made movie that nobody knew about and wanted to see, and we get $8 million of free promotion out of that God provided. So I just look back to pray and be obedient and just be faithful with what he gives you, because the marketing, you talked about titles just a second ago. There was a movie called To the Wall that Kevin Downs was working on, and Bob renamed it Faith of Our Fathers. And I'm like, I want to go see a movie called Faith of My Fathers. I don't really want to go see a movie called To the Wall. What was the byline for Beyond the Mask? You came up with that. It was something about liberty. It was so good. When it popped up on the trailer, I was like, what? That was brilliant. Where'd that come from? They said, Bob Gordon. And I was like, yes. It was so genius in the marketing to have people and their ideas around.
Yeah, and it's fun as a communications person. I always say my job in the marketing communication side of things is when these gentlemen are done, when the filmmakers are done telling their incredible stories on camera, my job's to tell it in such a way that makes you all want to go see it as a movie audience. And the idea of, I have no job if these guys aren't great filmmakers. And to understand that we're just a little cog in the wheel, but at times it's 60% of that
it makes
cog.
a big difference. I mean, think about, I thought one of the most brilliant campaigns last year, I don't know who came up with it, on the Sound of Freedom. I kept seeing it pop up. I remember I was literally the morning that movie came out, I was sitting with some of the guys I'm working with, the Small Bones, and they had made a movie called Priceless that came out a few years ago, and it was a movie about human trafficking, and it bombed in the standards of financially. And so he was like, those movies won't do well. Human trafficking movies, it's too hard, it's too heavy. And then the movie goes on to be the biggest, So here's the truth: nobody knows anything. Pray a lot. But
That's right.
but they had this line in there that I'm sure some brilliant person like Bob came up with, where literally Jim Caviezel says in the movie, God's children are not for sale. That was like profound. That sums the movie up just like that. And it just gives you something to grasp onto, and you go, yeah. And then they had Jim Caviezel in front of the trailer going, "This is the most important movie I've done since The Passion of the Christ." Huge.
This is the most important movie.
So there was somebody like Bob who probably said, "Guys, what about that line in the movie that says God's children are not for sale? Why don't we put that in the front?" So it's hugely important.
And really,
Beyond the Mask tagline, "Let true freedom ring."
the true being
Such
the
a
key
good
word there.
movie,
Yeah.
by the way. Such an
That's
underrated
such a
movie.
great movie. But yeah, it's the best marketing comes from the film. It's as Steve was saying, it's the trailer. As Josh was saying, it's the key words that are in the film. It's the heartbeat of the film. Let true freedom ring. It was a Christian story about the Revolutionary War. It's naturally fits in the movie. And one of the things, and not that that's what we're talking about, one of the things with taglines I always say is, I don't want to create a tagline that could work for any other movie. I want the tagline to fit this movie and only this movie. And that eliminates a lot of really decent potential ones, but if the movie that's coming out 2 weeks later could have used it, it's not a good tagline. Okay, let's jump ahead. What are some practical principles I can use to decide where to spend my marketing budget on my film? I think we're looking at you first, Mr. Harper. Sorry, Stephen.
I'll tell you a strategy that Revelation Media has been using. We'll put out a free preview, we call it, and someone needs to put in their email address to watch the free preview. And it'll be some select scenes, some behind the scenes from the filmmakers saying why they made the movie. And when we start to promote that with the artwork and with the keywords, the taglines, and the call to actions, the people that respond and put in their email address all of a sudden tells us very quickly, hey, look, this is an interested audience. These days, excuse me, with digital advertising, because it is so smart, you can get into analysis paralysis, but when let's say we gather 1,000 emails or 500 emails from something like that, there's something called a lookalike audience. You can upload those emails into Facebook, and it's a custom audience, and it tells you your lookalike audience that you can begin to advertise to. And I know like Ash Grayson is one of the digital marketers in this space from Ribbo that's done really, really well. He was getting trailer views for I Can Only Imagine for like a penny. We had a digital team on What Rhymes
Those were
with
the good
Reason.
old days, weren't they?
Oh
We were
my
getting
gosh,
like
they were.
6 cents a view for a trailer. And so I would say probably half the budget towards advertising. It depends on the film, it depends on the affinity and the other things that you need. But these days, because you can know who the audience is and who's interested, and you can start to go down that trail with that audience, I'd say save as much as you can for advertising.
And one of the other brilliant things about giving something to collect something, having the email address, in this day and age, in the last few years, you don't know what social media is going to do. You don't know what they're going to allow. Algorithms change all the time. The beauty of having email addresses is you can communicate directly to them and to the next level to have the text number. Do you ever not look at a text that you get? You always look at it. So if you can communicate clearly in a text, that's a great tool to have. So to collect data is really important in marketing. Stephen, you were going to say something? Okay, he's good.
We're just like watching it right now, me and Steven, because we have movies in the marketplace. We're going, I hope I know what I'm talking about.
Okay, I want to mention one thing. Flywheel was me and like $3,000. And we used our church printer because it's just local. I found out we could rent some billboards in town. So I took a picture of Alex standing outside the car lot, and we put it up on a billboard. Filmed in Albany, Georgia. I just leveraged what we had, And then we got our print shop to print these little 11 by 17 sheets with promoting, and I got a local restaurant that is very popular to make it their placemats on their trays for everybody getting a meal. And then I went to our local Chick-fil-A, and I said, we've got a Christian film that's coming out. Would you be willing to help us promote it and just put it in all the bags? He's like, give me 10,000 of them. We'll blow through them in like 2 days or whatever it was. So I was like, wow. So we printed it in our print shop, and then we went to our local Chick-fil-A, and every bag is getting this. And I realized it's got to be tall and skinny so it doesn't fall down in the bottom of the bag and they don't feel it when they reach and grab their fries. It's got to poke up, and it's got to be hard enough cardstock. Learn it the hard way, So we're just little bitty things that we're using, and then we're any kind of radio station or local newspaper. You're kind of shifting the pitch to whoever the audience is. So when Facing the Giants came out, we're contacting the Southern Baptist Convention, and we're saying, hey, we're a Southern Baptist church that made a movie. But when we're calling FCA, this is a movie about sports and the gospel. And then we're working with people that are football fans. We got a new football movie that's coming out, you know? And then we're talking to evangelistic ministries, and we're like, this is a movie that presents the gospel, you know? Jesus, every time he would step into a context, he would adapt the gospel to the context. So at a funeral, he says, I'm the resurrection and the life. And the woman at the well, I can give you living water, and you're never going to thirst again. You know, everywhere he went, he would adapt the gospel to the context. He's not changing the gospel. He's being honest about it. So in our marketing, even with The Forge, we're going to have different pitches for the same movie that are honest and authentic, but specifically tailored for that audience that we're working with.
Such a difficult, like, if you feel like God has given you any other gifts, you should probably go do that. Because here's what's crazy. Stephen and Alex, how many movies have you guys produced now? 8 movies. They have one of the best track records of filmmakers in the space. Still, every movie is like starting over. Yes. It's like, you know, it's not like I talk to a lot of business guys that get involved in this space, and they go, you make a widget and you market it, you know, for 20 years. It's like you don't really get to do that in film. Even like some of the best known names in the wider audience, filmmaking community that put out films, barely any of them can get repeat business like they did before. Every single one of these things is like launching a new company. You're getting out there, you have to inform them. One, you hope to tie your products that you've done before so there's brand loyalty. Yeah. But in some ways, I don't know a lot of people, like, we're big nerds in this room, but I doubt even us, there's 5 filmmakers, you could tell me, directors that you love their movies. Maybe in this room. But most of us go, oh, that trailer looked really cool. I'm going to go see it. You know, or that really looks like something I'm going to enjoy. So you got to think, if we're the nerdiest group of people in this and we still see something and go, that's cool, and we usually afterwards IMDb it and look up who the person was. Yeah. You know, unless it's Christopher Nolan or someone very exceptional that has a brand that he can, or James Cameron that can mobilize people, most of us are going to have to re-educate the audience every time. The same, like, you'll have so many people, if you guys do this, that you'll encounter that will be the experts, and you're still going to have to challenge those people because they're taking, like, principles they learned on the last movie and trying to apply them to your movie, which doesn't always work. You know, there might be a film that this worked really well, but on your movie it doesn't. So you have to start over constantly. It's the process of, like, reimagining things. It's difficult stuff.
Which is why you often find entrepreneurial spirited people in the film industry. Josh is as entrepreneurial as anybody I've ever met. Mark, I can't tell you how many different businesses have you started. And Stephen, I mean, every story is really, as Josh has said, a new business, a new way to communicate the never-changing gospel in a way that will reach this current audience.
I will say, too, about Angel. I've got 2 very good friends now that work over there, and they've told me, you know, Angel is a tech company. They are doing so much digital work, testing. They'll put out trailers, and they'll see how many times that QR code is scanned, and then they'll tweak a trailer. They'll check color palettes with the Guild. Even before they green light a film, they're getting that feedback from that audience. So I would say feedback, testing, asking people, research, and who is your audience, and how did they respond? Maybe that audience is not the audience you thought it was. I generally define 2 audiences: your target audience, who you're trying to reach, and who you know from feedback this story reaches, but who is your core support audience? Who's the
core
people
support audience for Unsung Hero is everyone. Everybody who likes movies.
Right.
It's going to be great.
Yeah. So those.
Yeah,
those
if you say
Sorry for
your
the
audience
insider
is
jokes up
everyone,
It's for nobody.
yeah.
Yeah, some of the worst disasters we've worked on are the films that the producers and the studio are telling us this is.
And I get it.
This is for everyone. This
Nobody
is a crossover.
wants Bob to sit there and tell him, you know, your movie's not for everybody. Maybe James Cameron's movies are for everybody, but they're like the reality, as Bob and Mark and guys that work in the space will tell the delusional filmmakers like Stephen and I, is that there needs to be an audience that gets extremely excited. And in Christian, this is a bigger discussion, but in Christian communities, I feel like we're always so afraid of who we are, or limiting our audience, or making the film not real art, or something that we end up overcorrecting to the other side, where we don't have anybody excited about our film, and we fall into these like chasms of projects where nobody's excited about it. If our audience,
So let's talk about Chasm Films for just
it's
a
a
second. Okay?
wonderful topic.
Okay, so Chasm Films, one example is a movie that's too worldly for Christians. So pastors don't promote it because it has profanity and worldly content in it, or there's a sex scene or whatever. Whatever it is, there's something in it that offends Christians, so Christians can't get behind it. But it's too Christian for the world. And so they don't get behind it either, and it falls inside this chasm.
Lot
so
of
you're
films have
straddling
gone
the
there.
fence. There are multiple films by talented
Yep.
people
Part-
who
well,
love
I've been a
Jesus.
part of them.
That, and we've got it, where they would be contacting us going, please endorse our film. And I'm like, I can't endorse it unless I see it. And then when we watch it, and I was like, there's a reason I can't endorse it. And so there have been millions and millions of dollars spent on marketing. They're marketing Chasm Films, and they're marketing popsicles to Eskimos. And they don't want popsicles. And either way, they
I
get in
think it
trouble.
becomes a heart issue. You really got to ask yourself, as filmmakers, why you're doing something. Like, I use it a lot, this analogy, and I get sometimes sideways looks, and I mean this in the most wonderful way, but I feel like the faith community of film consumers function a lot like the horror film community does. And everyone always goes like, what? And I say that because there couldn't be two different audiences, obviously. But as far as a function goes, you have people in the horror film industry, and I think there's a lot to learn from the business practices. Don't watch the movies. But there's a core audience that is happy that the faith film is even being made. They will consume every faith film put out. Like, they are going to be the ones that, like your mom, that will say, I love this every time, right? And that's a community of people, and they should not be overlooked. They should not be disrespected. And then there are larger groups to win over with the quality, with the excellence of the film that might not be as frequent goers of it. And that's the same in the horror film industry. And one of the most brilliant guys in that would be a guy, Jason Blum, who started Blumhouse. He's made movies in the horror film genre that are not at all, like, nobody at Blumhouse. I always joke with this with the filmmakers that come at me with the whole, like, oh, we're Christians that make movies. We're not Christian filmmakers. And I'm like, ugh. Like, not again, because there's nobody at Blumhouse that's going, we're filmmakers who make horror films. We're not horror filmmakers. Like, they don't care. They go, no, we love our audience. We love that these people are supporting these films that want to get the message out, and we're not ashamed of it. And they make these movies that do really well. But in the faith community, we get so uncomfortable with somehow not being real art, or not being, and nobody cares. You're making a movie that only you want to go see. And actually, and usually when I drill down with these filmmakers, they wouldn't even want to go see. That's right. They wouldn't go see their movie. They would just go see whatever other movie's out.
So I'd call it the Christmas cut. I've had this conversation with so many filmmakers, and they come to me, and we watch the movie together, and I say, you need to take out this scene, you ought to change that. And they're like, but I worked so hard on that, and I love it, and it makes me laugh. And I'm like, okay, then have a Christmas cut that you watch with your family with that content in there. But do not ask the world to consume this just because you personally like it, because you're serving yourself. If you're really going to serve the audience and lay down your life for them, in a sense, and meet their needs and point them to Christ, keep that in mind. You're serving them. You're not serving yourself, and it ought to affect how you edit your film.
Tyler Perry said, I've heard him quoted, that the narrower the focus, the broader the appeal. And you talk about a guy that makes very narrowly focused films and has become one of the most successful filmmakers in Hollywood. From a practical, not really as much spiritually speaking, just from a practical, I appeal, like, that is true. Like, if you make a film very specifically in mind for an audience that you love, that you relate with, and like, God will use that. People are going to see this movie, and you're not going to be able to, I don't know if you're going to be able to trick people into the gospel. I don't know, like, if that works or not, but I haven't seen it effectively done.
Yeah. And back to Alex's point at lunch today when he said there came a point where you all decided you are making films for the church. And I remember it vividly. We're in Charlotte, War Room is starting, and that's the first thing the Kendrick brothers said in front of the whole cast and crew. It's like, God has put it on our heart that we're going to make movies for the church.
And nobody gets more grief than the Kendricks, but nobody's had as consistent of a record. So there you go. So
But it's that idea of knowing who your audience is, supporting them, cheering them on. It's not like you're talking down to your audience. You're talking with your audience. You're sharing with them. And that, if anything, if you take anything out of this, is know yourself so that you can know your audience. If you don't believe the gospel, it's not going to play out right in your film because it's not.
So let's talk about money on one end. We had very little at the beginning. Facing the Giants, there was $4 million that was marketing money, the P&A, for them to market that film and build the trailers and the posters and all the stuff that they did. And to us, that seemed like $4 billion. I mean, at the time. But then it jumped up for Fireproof. It was closer to 7, I think. And then we went to 9 and then 11 on Courageous, I think. And so when people see what we're doing, there is a robust amount of money. The movie itself was $100,000 to shoot Facing the Giants with $4 million of marketing backing it up, with people that have the pipelines into these theaters and they understand the trailer people. So it's not fair for some people to say, hey, man, you know, the Kendrick brothers, how come my movie's better than theirs? How come mine didn't do as well? Well, there was a lot of money that went into some of that behind the scenes. If you don't have money, you need to pray that God will give you and you need to pray anyway. Even if you do have a lot of money, you need to pray. But you need to ask the Lord for unique ways to connect with audiences where it's word of mouth, and you're going to have to add a whole lot of time and a lot of hard work in the process to make up for a lack of money. So some of these guys, and they can tell you, I mean, all three of these guys, they have worked very, very hard on films. And they've screened it again and again. What you said, 1,000 times you've screened them? Sometimes it is making the same speech in a different state over and over again. It's almost like a political campaign in a sense. And there's so much strategy going in as to how can we connect with people, and you're just hunkering down. And sometimes it's a year of that you're working it, that up underneath the moving swan is a whole lot of hard work.
Yeah, I think on the money scale, if money is very low, affinity for that film is everything.
Yep.
Who is going to care the most about that film? Is it a film about foster care and adoption? Is it a film about helping teenagers with mental health? Is it a sports film? Is it, looking at not just the themes, but also the message? And, there's a lot of, the reason churches have become such a target for marketing over the years is because churches care about the spiritual growth of people, reaching people for Christ. So yeah, there are a lot, but the church is as diverse as culture. You can say, oh, well, I've got a Christian film, the church should help me. No, it depends on who is that church reaching and what's the message of the film and the audience for it. So affinity is critical.
Also in a time when films are very difficult to release. Like theatrical box office post-pandemic is a very challenging place to be. Like pre-pandemic, things that worked well, post-pandemic aren't. Like the habit loops have changed. People are not going to the box office for films that they don't see as an event. So now you have to ask your question, like, who is my audience? And is this film going to rally that audience in an event type manner? Or you could be in jeopardy of putting on a film that's really good that someone goes, I'm going to watch that when it goes on Netflix. That's like always the depressing thing for filmmakers the week the movie comes out. Like the top Googled search is like, where do I watch Jesus Revolution streaming? It's like, it's just the world we live in. So you have to really now think like, okay, is it a movie worth making? Is there an audience that's going to come out for it? Do I feel called by God to do it? And is it going to be an event for that audience? At least in the theatrical space.
The most painful question you'll get is, when is your movie coming out? And it already released. Right?
So true. Okay, so we are wrapping up. It's 3:30. Thank you for being here. A couple of things I just want to make sure we remember. So the affinity, low budget, you don't have a lot of P&A, you don't have money. Creativity, as Stephen was saying. Creativity is huge. As Mark was saying, affinity is huge. And we've talked a whole lot about money, and I don't want that to be the message that you heard. Phil Vischer, who created VeggieTales, I used to work there, and he would always tell us as a staff, we don't make VeggieTales to make money, but if we don't make money, we can't make VeggieTales. So keep that in mind. You need to have a story that's going to resonate with an audience so that you can live to tell your next story.
And people are finding new ways more than ever. Yes, the theatrical space is incredibly challenged, but also this environment we're in, like look at what Dallas Jenkins did with The Chosen. I mean, he found his audience online with a free product. Now when he puts a movie out, I don't know if it's changed, but if he puts a season out, he won't even market it in theater. He won't spend millions of dollars in P&A to market one of the episodes of The Chosen. He'll just tell them. Like I remember talking to him, like, what do you guys spend on that? They're like, well, we just went on and did a Facebook Live. So the world is changing. Content is getting to people in more ways, which is difficult when we're trying to release expensive theatrical movies, but it's also an opportunity to reach people with the content God's called you to make.
Stephen will give you final word.
Okay. Do not despise small beginnings and be faithful with little. Make a short. If you're not ready for a feature film because it's a Mount Everest of work, make a short and be faithful with it and do a good job. If somebody gives you $100 in marketing for your film, be faithful with that $100. What we looking back did tons of free shorts for this church, for other places that were ministry focused. And when people started being moved by a 4-minute veterans video that Alex didn't hear, and it turned into a standing ovation, people crying because it honored veterans, and he did it for free and got volunteers to do it. That opened the door for the 10-minute short. And then the blessing came with that. So if you have, whether it's the content you're producing or it's the money that you're being invested, be faithful with it. And God blesses faithfulness. And he says, if you're faithful over a few things, I'll make you ruler over many. So many times we're looking at very little time or very little budget or very little ability, and we're like, Lord, this is our loaves and fish. Help us to be faithful with it. And then that faithfulness, God will bless you then. Say, okay, I can trust you now with a lot more money because you were faithful with every penny of what I gave you before.
Okay, so we up here want to thank you all for being here. And I would ask you if you could thank Stephen Kendrick, Mark Harper, and Josh Walsh for...
And Bob Gordon.